Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great GM. Well, today's episode is how to draw a dungeon and cave system. By popular demand, that's what you guys have been asking for. So this is my process. I've got no plans here, nothing whatsoever. I'm just going to be working through it, so it might be a fairly lengthy tutorial. And in the background, you might hear that we've got music, beautiful music that's coming from battlebards.com. They feature in our weekly show the adventures of the Windswift RPG, which is on the other channel, Bacon Battalion RPG. And you can watch the guys go through an adventure there that I run every Sunday for them. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So I'm using Photoshop, like 2013, 2014 version. I haven't upgraded. I don't see the need in my personal case because I'm drawing maps with it. What I've done is I've created 3 layers plus a bonus hidden layer here. But my 3 layers are basically the background, which I could actually delete, grid, which is my grid, which is doing all sorts of funny things on the preview monitor here. But I've got my grid, and then I've got the actual layer that I'm going to be drawing the cave on. Now, each of these squares, as I zoom in, Control plus, each of these squares are representing 5 foot, or is representing 5 foot, and I'll start from there. Now, the idea that I had is, and I'm just going to turn this music down because, well, music's nice and it inspires me, and I like to listen to the music that I use during the game so I can anticipate what's coming up. Anyway, I've created a brush tool here. It's size 6. It's brown. It's that kind of brown that I'm going for so that I can draw all over the place and create my cave system. Now, I'm not going to do it like that, of course. What I wanted to do was I wanted to create an underground temple that you access through a cave system. So the temple has been long forgotten, pieces of mountain have collapsed over it. So the only way to get into it is through this cave system, because what strikes me as an interesting idea is if there is a landslide and villagers report of this strange mist that's wafting out of this cave in the nearby hillside. It's a fairly obvious adventure hook, but, well, maybe we can be a little bit more interesting than that and say that the mist is starting to cause the creatures in the graveyard to rise up, and so our adventurers are pulled into it as they are attacked by undead, or something along those lines. I don't know yet, I haven't drawn it. Now, grid paper is tricky because, of course, how big is big? How big do we want to make this thing? Well, let's start. That's the bottom line, is you've got to start somewhere. So I'm going to say that we're entering in from the side of the dungeon here. I'm going to zoom in so that I can see what I'm doing. That's Control plus again. Hold spacebar down to navigate around. It gives you that little hand. Hold spacebar down to navigate around whilst you have your other tools selected. I find that really useful to just make it nice and quick. So I'm going to randomly choose a point, and the point has been chosen as here. This is the point. So we need to draw the edge of the mountain range, if you want to call it that. Okay, again, spacebar to lift it up. All right, so this is all mountainside here. This is our entrance here. And we're going to make it a 10-foot wide. No, let's make it scary. We're going to make it a 5-foot wide entrance into this cave. We'll have a bit of a dugout here. Oh, I like the idea of having a waterfall entrance as well. The reason being, my people might need to get out at some point. Now, the way that I get this fairly jagged line is I'm using a mouse to draw with. Gasp, shock, horror, yes. But I lift my mouse just slightly off of the mouse pad so that it gives this natural shake, which sometimes creates some interesting lines. So I'm going to have a waterfall exit down here. And so we're going to come up and just finish off the mountain there. All right, so I've got my 2 entrance points there. This is the main one that they're going to come in through. And then down here is where the waterfall will be gushing through. So let's come up here first. And we're going to draw an entrance. Now, as they come in, we need to set the tone for this adventure. So we're going to have it wind its way into a cavernous space. And we're going to have some branches that lead off because players like to explore. And they like to split up to explore too, which is always my favorite thing. I'm going to have a nice big tunnel going off down that way. A definite GM wants you to go this way type of thing. Alright, so there we go. We've now got our entrance into our cave system. I'm going to just throw in a few little stalagmites here. just to indicate that this is a chamber that's full of old things, just freehand drawing little spaces and things. Now, a map like this, you might want to expand so that it's bigger, and again, having it gridded allows you to translate this particular section, if you want to do battle and that kind of stuff, onto a game mat quite easily, I find. I'm also not too particular about the outlines being on certain points and making sure that it's 5 foot. It's a narrow entrance, they get that. So in here we could have some kind of combat. Down here I want to hint towards the river so that they might be able to remember that about 400 feet away, maybe even more, there is a water system that they could potentially exploit. So down here I'm going to have a little side chamber, and then it's going to branch this way into some kind of larger chamber, coming around, and just give it some interesting little areas that things can hide in. Again, keeping it narrow. I don't want them to fight abreast. I want to fight one at a time. There's a reason for that. It's going to make it a lot more difficult for them to just charge through. Their fighter, or whoever's in front, is going to be taking strain if it's just him constantly, or her constantly, being attacked. I'm going to put in some stalactites here for goblin archers or undead or whatever we decide to populate this with, and we will make that decision, and we're going to make that a little bit later on once we've finished drawing the castle, the dungeon, because like almost everything I do, I draw inspiration from the environment as I draw it. So what I'm going to do here is, this is actually going to be a lake system. There's going to be water in here. So I'll come back to that. And this is just another chamber. I'm going to throw in a stalagmite here. Generally, stalagmites form in little clusters where water's dripping in through the roof. Not sure what'll happen in there. The halflings are having fun. Okay, so now we want to get into the actual dungeon proper. They might go off down there, they might go down here and have a look, they might not, who knows. We're going to come back to that. So now I'm just going to expand this out. Ooh, the music's taken a dark tone, so I kind of like that for inspiration. And here's what the inspiration has led me to suddenly add in. Because it's dark and ominous. Whatever's living in these little caves, be it bears or wolves and things, will have this problem to contend with. This is actually, and I'm going to do that, you'll see what I'm doing now in a little bit. I'm not completely mad. Well, maybe a little bit mad. Alright, is we've got... I don't think there's much more space up there. Oh, there is a bit of space. Alright. Okay. So this is where I will use the very edge of my map to define an interest point. Okay, so we've got something happening here, and I've got this large space, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to put into that just now. So let's just finish off this. This is a large tunnel. Let's put in a chamber of some kind in here, which will feed into there, and be this strange shape, and this will just be a small chamber. Let's make this feel like the stalactites are columns that lead dramatically into this slightly larger chamber. What is that? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 foot. So it's not that big, but we've got a sense of maybe something dramatic happening in here. Cave systems are fairly easy. They don't demand much in terms of thought to design. You just want to make them cool. So we've now got this area which we can lock off. We've got this area which we can lock off. I'm going to create a new layer just so that I remember where the hell I am. And I'm going to call this solid rock. And I'm just going to use my magic tool here. On my cave layer, I'm going to select that area inside the walls, come back to solid rock, and just fill it up so that we get something like that. You'll see what I'm going to do later on. It'll be a bit more of a fill. You can smack it twice just to get rid of those white lines. I think that's how to do it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're going to come back to that anyway, just so that we know that it's solid, and that's how that's working. Now, I did say I was going to come back to this area here where we want to do something interesting. So I'll sort that out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size of my brush here from 6. I'm going to change it to 3, and I'm going to do this, which on the map will represent a sticking out, or outcropping, I suppose you could call it, an outcropping of rock. Okay, and to show that these are not very stable, I'm going to put in bits here. Now the instruction that I will give to my GMs running this map will be that these are stalactites, which I'll figure out how to color in just now. These are stalactites which the players can jump onto or across of, but the chamber below is a sheer drop. Alright, so I'll do some of that. And maybe, to try and get them to go down there, maybe we'll put in a big block here. Put some gold there if you like. Because one must always tempt the curious, the adventurers, and let them make their own mistakes, eh? Okay, this I'm not going to worry about. This is going to be a river that flows in here and pools around down here. This will be for the meek and the mild. If they get here and they go, oh, it's a 5-foot jump, it's a 5-foot jump. These are not too difficult jumps, 5 foot, 5 foot, 5 foot. But there's always the risk that one of these things collapses, and we'll put that into the dungeon notes. Right, time to restore you back to 6. Consistency of the pen size is also very important. Right, so now we've done with that. This is the water confluence, the water course that's going to proliferate throughout. So I kind of feel like it needs to come, we're going to have a flow out here and we're going to have a flow there. So I kind of feel like we need to lock this down. I don't think I'm going to have anything else there. Alright, so I'm just going to draw a great big lake which we can fill with all kinds of wonderful creatures. Okay, you've inspired me. I'll put a little thing in there. And through it gushes down there. How much space we got? Not a lot of space down here, so we're not going to stuff around too much. Okay. Here's a lake. We could even make these squares 10 foot if you really wanted to make it much more dramatic, much bigger than what it is. Now, I'm not going to do too much beyond this point because I want to be able to keep this space here anyway available. I'm going to put in some big stalactites here. As the water would flow round and down and across and all that kind of thing. Now this of course is level 1 of the cave, and I'll show you a little later on how we're going to do level 2. To give a sense of height. And because dungeons generally have more than one layer to them. The cave system maybe not so much, but the dungeon definitely. Alright, so now we come back here. They've hop, skipped and jumped across. And this leads them into a space. We want to have some kind of combat for them going the easy route. However, That now leads us to a door into a room which will basically lock down into that. Alright, so now we get to drawing rooms and things. Now for that I switch over to the pen tool. Now the pen tool allows you to draw basically straight lines-ish, roughly. If I zoom in here, you'll see it's not very straight. So I hold down the Alt key, the Control key. It's on a PC, obviously, and I can straighten it up. Then you right-click on it, and you say Stroke Path using the brush. Now, it will use whatever brush thickness you've got here. So if you have a thin brush selected, it will make it thin. I would advise to check that first before you do this. Now, critically, and there's maybe other ways to do it, you have to delete the path afterwards because it wants to just join itself. That's all it's designed to do. So it just wants to join itself. But now we are free to draw as we choose. So they're going to want a space out of this room. Let's give it a 5-foot block into another room. Now we have to start thinking in terms of our space, what's going on. So I generally don't draw too far along, and I don't mind the lines being slightly skewed. It gives it more of an organic look, as if I've actually done hard work and drawn it on paper. Now you see I didn't delete it, so it's created this funny little line. Let's get rid of that, delete path. Alright, so now we're going to finish off this room, and it's a 5-foot door, so we're going to close it up there. This room here, I think we need to have an exit down there into a long corridor, which will run to a room down here. This room could be quite spectacular because this room is designed to have a privy space in it, which will lead out into that water below. Alright, I think that's enough there, and stroke path, and we are done with that sort of basic space. Alright, delete path. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to just use my wand tool here, come in here and go back to my solid rock layer and just fill it so that we get a sense of what's solid and what's not. If I pull out here, I think we've also got another solid layer here. This just helps me in terms of visual checking it out, going, yeah, that looks interesting, or no, it doesn't, etc., etc., etc. All right. Let's carry on. Now, for those of you that want to skip to placing doors and working out all that kind of stuff, please move forward in the video. It does take a long time to draw these maps. We're 18 minutes in, and, well, we've got a rather interesting cave system starting to form, I think. There's plenty of rooms for combat. There's some organic cave that we've built in, and that's led us across with a little bit of a challenge to get into the first dungeon. We'll put in some doors here and there and that kind of thing, just to lock them out. And we've got something interesting happening down here, which we must come back to. Okay, so carrying on with the dungeon. Now, when we talk about dungeons, and I've said this before in terms of drawing maps on the fly and that kind of thing, the key is to try and determine the purpose. Why was this built in the first place, and by whom? So that's what we've got to answer the question of now, except that I'm going to take a sip of coffee. And of course the music stops at that exact moment because I was hoping it was going to hide the sound of me quaffing my coffee. Okay, so this room here, we assume that they did not anticipate a rockfall which would open up this territory here. So this room would be an auxiliary room. It's a room that services this room here. What would this room have been? Well, I think, just to make it interesting and to give us options in terms of what our narrative is, what if, bear with me. I'm going to change my brush size down to 3. What if this room was a prison? This room was the holding cells for the temple. Oh, I've gone fill. Wrong thing. Stroke. So if these are the holding cells, they would have been held, able to hold 4 prisoners, let's say. Very small little space for them to do it. There's going to be bits of this wall left here. Let's just do that. Stroke path. Delete path. Alright, so we've got some sort of holding cells happening here. I'm going to come here and just show that there is rubble. Very crudely. Just draw random bits. Just to show that this is a cave in here. And the same here. You've got to use whatever representation you like. Sometimes I use this for foliage. It just shows basically impassable terrain. Something has happened here, so it's a collapse. Alright, that gives us our entrance in. Okay, and those are prison cells. So this is a prison.